Hey everybody, welcome back to Leading Thriving Cities, our new show where we want to shine a spotlight on leadership and public service and have deep conversations about how to create a sustainable future for our cities. My name is Chad Wright. I'm the founder of Forward Partners. Today's guest is Chief Tony Haden from the Travis County ESD 8 Fire Department. We have such a great conversation. He gave me one of his challenge coins, and on here it says Vision Caster and Culture Warrior. We talk about how those two sides of that job as an executive leader, you're both Vision Caster and Culture Warrior. There is so much knowledge that you're going to find in this conversation, and I cannot wait for you to see it. Thank you for joining us on Leading Thriving Cities. All right, Chief Haden, thank you for being on Leading Thriving Cities. We are super excited to have you. You're our first fire chief.
So awesome.
That's
all right.
a commitment.
Pressure.
We got police chiefs by the dozens, but man, a fire chief. I'm excited about that.
Me too. Thank you.
Part of why we do this is so people can better understand the roles in public service.
Right.
And police chief is obviously, or fire chief is obviously far more complicated than what most people probably think it is. If you could answer for people, what's one thing you wish they understood about being a fire chief?
Your question is actually part of the answer here for me. So my roadmap to becoming the chief, it wasn't what I set out to do early in my career.
Okay.
My career goal when I started, I really wanted to be a captain for a truck captain.
Yeah.
Be the last rank that you get to be, where you're with the crew, you're going and fighting fires.
You're on the ground doing the work.
Yeah. And so that was what I wanted to do. I was real excited about it. And then along the way, that ambition kind of changed, and I got up into some of the roles and moved up and up and up.
Yeah.
To the point where I was like, I think I might want to be a fire chief, and started really kind of preparing myself more for that and aiming for it. And then about a year ago, I was named fire chief for my department. Yeah. And it was like almost a I don't know, just out of body experience. Like, I'm sitting there and I'm looking at it, I'm like, I'm the fire chief. What does that mean? And so I've seen a bunch of fire chiefs, and I've been around a bunch of people that are the fire chief. And, But what does that mean to me? How am I going to be a fire chief?
Yep.
So to me, I wanted to kind of rebrand that and rename that. So a lot of times, like if I introduce myself to somebody, I say I'm a fire chief. Well, what that actually means to me is I have two main jobs, and they're jobs that I think, as the head of the department, they're my responsibility. Yep. I'm not going to go put out the fire, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a vision caster and a culture warrior. I'm going to own those things for the department.
Yes.
So I want to make sure that I'm the person that can tell the people in our community who we are, what we exist to do, like share that vision of public safety and public service that we provide. I want to be able to tell the men and women in my department where we're going.
Yes.
Right? And then I want to be the one that fights for us to have the culture that I believe makes the fire service like the greatest job in the world.
And the culture that can make that vision a reality, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's interesting. And on this challenge coin that you just brought us, by the way, guests, if you want to land on my list of favorite guests, challenge coin, always the way to go. You have that listed under where it says Office of the Fire Chief, Tony Haden. It says Vision Caster, Culture Warrior. And I think it's interesting, those two sides, because you do have to be able to say, where are we going? And when I work with organizations that are kind of struggling a little bit, a lot of what I'll hear at the mid or lower level is, what are we even doing here? Like, we're doing the job, but for what? Where's it going? And so that vision of here's where we're going, here's what the future is we can create. But then if the culture piece is not there, you're not going to create that future, are you?
No, and they both have to be there.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, embarrassingly, so this is who I want to be, right? I want to be a vision caster, culture warrior. I'm sitting there, I'm having a conversation with my assistant chief, who I hired 8 months ago.
Yeah.
But I know him from the past, and we're talking, and he says, hey, I would like to know more about our vision. Yeah. And it was pretty challenging to me. He had been with us for 6 months, probably 7 months almost, whenever we had this conversation. Because now it's been probably closer to a year. And so I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh man, I'm failing. My assistant chief, who I have a ton of conversations with, has questions for me about our vision. Yes. And I feel like I got to do a better job at sharing that with everybody, and I'm missing the point with the assistant chief. Yeah. So I'm constantly challenged on that. Yeah. I do think it is always going to be a leader's challenge to like identify what it is that you want to be.
Yes.
And then be open to, you might not be nailing that, right?
Yes.
And so how do I get better at that? How do I re-envision this to do it a better way?
Yep.
I've got a board in my office that I call it my culture board, and I'll print stuff up and I'll have people write stuff down to help identify. I just did one where it was like, hey, what's your leadership style? And everybody got to pick the one that they thought was theirs. And it's going to help me as I work with them.
Yes.
If I have an issue or something one-on-one, I'm going to sit down with somebody. I can be like, how did this go wrong? I can go back and look and see, oh, this person views themselves as this type of leader.
Yes.
And so I kind of know how maybe they were framing it.
Yeah. That kind of conversation about leadership style, personality, we end up doing a lot of that work, because if I've got to have a conversation with somebody, especially if it's something that's gone wrong, if I understand what motivates them, what they're afraid of, I can go, oh, I see how they got to X, Y, and Z, and I see how we need to work on that in the future.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I took that stuff down, and I was like, I got to put up our vision. So I wrote out our vision of like why we exist, right? As a department, why we exist as an admin team, you know, how we serve, what it is that we should be doing. Because I was like, if my assistant chief hadn't been able to understand it, then I got to write this thing down, and I got to get this out into the language a little bit more. So I'm constantly juggling that. But yeah, the culture is huge to me as well.
I think where we can go wrong, though, is if we look at it as a check box and go, oh, vision's done, culture's done.
Never done.
It is your entire job. Like, it is the most important work you do. And you're always projecting out and going, okay, here's what I think the future is. Now here's the future once we get there. Now here's the future. It is this never-ending journey, and it's always kind of helping that culture stay in the shape it needs to be in to get there. And so it's not an end point. It's part of the journey itself. We had Chief Harmon, as the police chief of Cedar Park, was the previous interview we did, and we helped them establish their vision 4 years ago. And we were laughing because I told him at the time, I said, the goal is not that 6 months from now everybody knows your vision. The goal is that 4 years from now everybody knows your vision. 5 years from now, it's in their hearts and their souls. And the way we hear it come out usually at first is a lot of sarcasm, but you'll hear people talking about it and joking about it. Right. You're like, okay, that's step one. That's not a bad thing, you know? Yeah. But it is this long term. Can we get this where people get up and they go, hey, it's a rough day, but at least I'm serving a purpose. I am doing something good. And that is never ending work, isn't it?
Never ending. And I agree with you. And I think that when you're looking at vision and culture, both of those have to go together. Yes. And I think both of them are about feelings. Yeah. Like, if somebody can't repeat back to me what I've written on my board, and I couldn't tell you word for word what I wrote up there right now, but I can tell you what it means. I can tell you what it feels like. Yes. And so if people in my organization are able to do that exact same thing, and they know where we're going, because they're going to talk about that we're here to serve others, that we're here to we're here for our community, right? Above ourselves. Yeah. If this is what they're talking about, they're already understanding the vision. Yes. They don't have to I don't need to memorize a script that I wrote out. Right. Instead, I need you to have this memorized. I want them to feel it.
Believe it. Believe it. Yep. Like, let me ask you this. So there are the two sides, the vision and the culture. Have you run into challenges on the cultural side as you've tried to be a very vision-focused leader? Because the reality is, often people can get to your level and never really get this. Right. Never really understand the need for vision and the need for something deeper. So as you're implementing that, it's unusual to some people. Right. Have you run into cultural challenges that have made that a little more difficult? Yeah, I mean, culture is actually, I would say I started more on the culture. Gotcha. And maybe didn't focus on the vision quite as much as I would have wanted to on the front end. Yeah. But culture was one of the biggest things that I wanted to be an expert at. Yes. I told my department, I told my board, I said, look, if our culture fails, the board should fire me. My wife was like, please don't ever say that again. Like, that's a stupid thing to say. But like, that's how I feel about it. It's one of those deep held beliefs, right? Right. And but what I think is ultimately on both of those things, and maybe culture more than vision, is I need a team of people that are going to be, so if I'm a culture warrior of one, our culture is probably not going to be what I want it to be. Yeah. But if I got little culture warriors sprinkled all throughout my department at different ranks, at different stations, on different shifts, and they're the ones that are in there every day saying, hey, what we just did around here, this doesn't meet the culture. Yeah. The way that this shift felt, that doesn't meet the culture that we want.
because I'm not going to be there
Yep.
on Saturday afternoon
Yeah.
in their fire station.
Yep.
I'm not there on the way to and from a call in the cab. There's an officer there, but the officer might not be the culture warrior.
Yeah.
But if I had a culture warrior and an officer both in there,
Yes.
like we're going to be talking about culture.
Yes.
And so we're going to build those things. And so that's been one of the things for me, trying to build up and identify who are my culture warriors.
Who are the people that are really
bought
gonna
in.
get this? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
They're bought in. They want it. They want this place to be the same thing that I want this place to be.
You know, it's funny in creating these episodes, we always come up with social media clips and quotes, and your quote of, "If the culture fails, I should be fired."
Yeah.
I'm thinking about every leader we have ever encountered, from the top all the way down, to say, if the culture of my team fails, I should be fired. I'm thinking about how many of those organizations would be different in a positive way if they truly believe that, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I mean, that is how important I think that work is just understanding that it's everything, to make sure that your people have what it takes. They're equipped with the culture to be able to do their best work and to love the process. And it's oftentimes that's really, really hard to do. It is that never-ending work that does take investing in lower levels. Like you can't do it all yourself.
No. Absolutely not. And it's got to be every level.
Yes.
When we hire new people, my organization, I got about 50 people.
Yeah.
If I hire 5 people, that's a 10th of my whole department.
Yes. Yeah.
They're bringing in
Yeah.
important parts of our culture.
Yeah.
I'll sit down and talk with everybody new I hire, and I tell them just how much of our percentage of the culture that they bring in just by walking in the door.
Yeah.
And so if I get somebody new that's going to come in and be excited and believes this is the best job ever, and they're excited to go and serve the community, and they're talking about that, even if somebody else on their crew doesn't feel that way, they're increasing what we have as a department-wide in a much quicker way than in a bigger department can do. If I get 4 or 5 people really, really bought in that I can bring in,
that makes a huge
difference. A huge impact on my
So I'm
organization.
assuming culture and vision has been a big part of your hiring process.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's something y'all talk about a lot.
Absolutely. So when we did our last hiring process, our number one thing we were looking for was good fit. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't so much about your written score on our exam or your physical exam, like the speed that you went through the test. It was about how good are you as far as a fit for this. So in the interview, that was important. We had people watching them as they would come in to interview just to see how did they interact with the first person they met that they don't think's a part of the interview. Like, how does this person buy into our team? What type of person are you? In the interview, we're looking for people that we believe our department, they work a 48-96 shift. So for 48 hours,
spending a lot of time together. Yeah.
If somebody's not going to be a good fit, and you can tell, and in the room,
tough.
And they were our number one candidate coming in, I'm not going to want to hire them. I'm not inclined to bring them onto the team because they can wreck a 48-hour time period for 3 other people. That's huge. So I got to have the right people.
That starts to breed so many different problems when you have that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's kind of like having a brother or sister you grew up with that you just hated. Like every time you were together, you were miserable, right?
It's tough. Yeah.
It can be for sure.
So finding the right fit's real important to us. And I think it's a part of our culture and it's part of the vision.
Yeah.
Like, who do we want to bring in? Yeah. How do we want to build our team? And what do we want that to feel like? For the firefighters.
Well, and kind of like you talked about the vision side, you feel like you're aspiring to do that really well, but you may not be there yet. The cultural side, it's saying, hey, here's who we want to be as a culture. We're not going to be this 100% of the time. Everybody's going to have various levels of buy-in, and the goal is that over time that buy-in is increasing in some small percentage. Like I may be the person that thinks it's all stupid, but over time maybe I think it's less stupid, Yeah. And so there is that spectrum that people are on. You said you were promoted to fire chief a year ago.
Yes.
What has surprised you about some of that? Like, what's been the things? Because I think we always look up and we think we know what that's going to be like, and then we get there and our eyes are really opened. Beyond vision and culture, what did your eyes open to? What surprised you about that?
So a part of it for me, and I think I had a good idea about it. Yeah. But really, just the fact that I'm never really off. I go on vacation. Yeah. I'm on duty. It's very hard for me to disconnect.
Yes.
And, that's just a struggle that I face. Yep. Right. But that reality has been really eye-opening. The fact that everything that I say is a decision that was made.
Yes.
I've accidentally made decisions.
You're like, I'm thinking about switching cereal brands. Everybody's like, we're switching cereal brands. Chief said so.
Exactly. And so I've accidentally made decisions that I didn't mean to make. And so learning that has been really important to me.
Yeah. You start to learn the weight of every word that's said.
Absolutely.
The disconnection piece, I find that very interesting. So at Assistant Chief, were you able to disconnect better?
Yes and no. So I didn't feel the ultimate pressure of being the chief.
Yeah.
And so I did go on vacation where I felt like, hey, the odds of me having to jump on a plane and fly back are not very good. There's a fire chief.
There's a chief above me that's
there's a fire chief that's going to have to do that.
Yeah.
Today, if I went on vacation, I want to make sure that I know, all right, if I had to, I can get to this airport. I can be home. Somebody can come pick me up. I keep a uniform in my vehicle so that I could just, and in my office, so I could just go straight there, get dressed, and go show up to talk to the media or talk to, or be a part of whatever is this emergency that brought me home off of vacation.
Yeah.
So as assistant chief, it was different. This
I'm
is
curious
a different
at this level. Do you categorize? Here's the level of thing that would require me to jump in the car, get in the plane, fly home, put the uniform on, and do that. Like, my guess is that's a pretty limited category, right?
Yeah, it's small. And honestly, it's the type of stuff that hopefully we never have happen.
Yes.
But so I'm in Travis County. In 2011, there were devastating wildfires that blew through the area.
Yeah.
I would have been on a plane to come back. I would have had to.
Yes.
To be there to help my department, whether it's, we're on the outskirts of town, so maybe there's not news coverage there.
Yeah.
But I've got people in my department that are going to be working day after day after day.
You want to be
exhausted.
There for that.
And I would want to say, okay, I'm here.
Yes.
I'm here. I'm going to plug in. I'm probably not jumping on the brush truck to go put out the wildland fire.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be here, and I'll lift some of the load of talking to other agencies and doing all of those pieces.
Let me ask you this. Does that need to be engaged or connected in order to be ready for one of those events cause you to also stay connected at a lower level where you're returning emails about things that are not that level? They're just, I gotta stay on top of this.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah. And I do think it's one of the things that I struggle with is knowing where that line is and understanding this can wait.
Yeah.
We did just go on a vacation with my family. We went to the beach.
Nice.
And my assistant chief was like, hey, I've got it.
Yeah.
I will let you know. Like, if something crazy, check your phone every 8 hours.
Yeah.
And I'll make sure that you know. I was local enough I could drive back. It wouldn't have been a flight. And so I did. We went to we were at the coast, and I left my phone on the bedside table and went down and hung out and spent time with, and it was great.
Yeah.
It was hard to do.
Yes.
And there were a lot of times where I was like, I might need to walk back up to the house real quick. And all I really needed to do was like, I got to go look at my phone and see if there's
something
email.
I will give you is that it is hard because it's important.
Yeah.
I think it's some of the most important work you do. Today we have interviewed multiple police chiefs.
Okay.
Every one of them, we had this conversation where they talked about, one of them's retired. He said, I wish I knew that I needed to do that before I retired. Every one of them said, this is what I'm working on the most for my people.
Yeah.
Because what we see is we can tell our people, hey, I want you to take care of yourself. But if we don't model it, they don't actually follow it. They follow what we do. It's very much parenting, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the things I'm always giving them is guys, look, here's what you do. It's a simple system. You leave your phone somewhere. You give your assistant chief your wife's phone number and say, here are the 3 things you can use it for. And outside of this, I trust you. You got this.
Right.
And that simple system alone, you're still in contact. You're still reachable. You can still head back for the big emergency, but you're not locked into the little stuff. The little stuff that will be fine without you. It is the hardest thing for us to do as leaders, but I genuinely think it's the most important work we do.
I'm glad you said that. Thank you for that. That's a really good piece of advice.
Well, it's part of the culture, right? Like if
Absolutely.
I want my people showing up refreshed every day, I got to find out how to show up refreshed as well.
Definitely.
And it is one of the tough things. That is, the weight you're feeling, you're not alone in that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. No, and I agree. And I do know, I agree. I'm not alone in that. Yeah. So I've talked with other chiefs about this same thing.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that's the answer that I get most of the time. I'm like, hey, man, how do you manage, work-life balance here?
Yeah.
And they're like, I don't know. If you find out, come tell me, please.
Well, I think two things on this. I love this conversation because I think it's two things. One is it's actually easier to not even worry about it, to just go, it has to be this way.
Right.
That takes all responsibility off of us. The other side is it really feels darkly good that I am so needed. I am so valuable that I can't disconnect. The world would stop without me. And we won't say those words out loud. I'm willing to say them because I know it's reality within most of us.
Yeah.
But that's what's driving us because we were all raised in the same generation.
Right.
You put your head down and run through the wall. Just shut up and do it.
Yeah.
And ultimately it doesn't work for us. We're not good at that, it turns out.
No.
And I think that's what we're learning as, I'm not sure if the fire service, how similar it is to the rest of public service, where it's a struggle sometimes to get young people to want to come into this.
Right.
Because they're looking for some work-life balance. They are looking for the ability to not burn yourself out, even as we serve and do good things. And so I think that a lot of public service is having to really shift how we think about things.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that when we're looking at that and looking at that next generation and how do they buy into this, we're lying to ourselves if we think, man, I'm so important that this thing can't happen without me.
Yes.
We're hiring some great people.
Yes.
So it's hard to hire people sometimes because there are people that look at this and go, man, I don't know that that's the commitment to time that I want to give, probably more than anything else at this point.
Because it's a different rhythm in the fire service.
It is.
That's a different rhythm of life even, isn't it?
It is. And in the fire service, so one of the things that I've heard a bunch of times throughout my career is it's the big red machine, right? And it's going to keep going whether you're in that spot or not.
Which is 100% true.
And it doesn't matter. I can leave tomorrow and Pedernales Fire Department is going to keep going forward and they're going to keep improving and they're going to keep responding to calls and they're going to keep educating our community without me.
Yeah.
And that's great. That's actually way better than if it was going to fall apart if I got hit by a bus.
Yeah.
Like that would be terrible.
We're really just stewards for a period of time for an organization. And the goal should be how can we do it sustainably so we can steward it as long as we want to.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's positive for everybody. Now you said how many years in the fire service?
Just over 27 years.
27 years. That's a long time in the fire service.
Yeah,
and you hit a point where you went, okay, maybe I do want to go beyond captain. Maybe I want to be a chief. Through that process, what's some of the internal things you had to wrestle with and get better at to say, okay, I want to make that jump from being an on-the-line leader to an organizational leader?
So I believe the fire service is really good at developing leaders, but not necessarily at managers. And so the reason is, you're going into these unknown situations. You keep moving up seats to next thing you know, you're in charge. Everybody's looking at you. It doesn't take a whole lot of times of doing that and going on calls where you get used to saying, hey, everybody follow me. We'll solve this. Even if I'm not I'm not going to have all the answers. We're going to do this as a team. Y'all follow me. I'm going to guide the process that will solve this problem through. So we develop leaders, and I think the fire service has a bunch of really good leaders, especially in the company officer ranks. And then as you start moving a little bit higher and you have to start dealing with management, I think that gets hard. And it's
what do you classify as management? Budgets
and projects and
admin,
HR, all the admin stuff.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And so as a company officer, I had very little interaction with budget early in my career. I had, if there was an HR issue, that got taken and handled somewhere else. I wasn't in charge of policies, right? Although if I did something wrong, there could be a policy with my name on it. And in the Austin Fire Department I retired from, there's two that are tied to me, like little pieces of stories there. But so that happens,
I'm curious, is that a story you at all want to share?
They're minor things, but like that I'm a part of, like some way timekeeping works or whatever. That it was a part of me earlier in my career, and I'm like, hey, that's a Tony Haden policy right there. Like I can recognize it. But I wasn't going to write the policy.
I think we have some Chad Wright policies that they would be happy to tell you about.
It's important to have, right? Like I need to be guided by policies, right? Yes. And I think we all do. Like we like that. We like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so going from leadership into management was a big deal for me.
Okay.
And just trying to marry those together, right?
Yeah.
How can I be really good at managing these projects that I need to do? My last position with Austin Fire Department was I was the logistics chief. I was in charge of construction and renovation of fire stations, the fleet, and the air shops. So a lot of like big projects.
Yeah.
And how do I manage these projects where I'm dealing with multiple millions of dollars of taxpayer and stuff that was kind of outside of my comfort zone?
Yeah.
How do I use these leadership skills and these relationships? Because I think leadership, if management is about getting a project or a process from A to Z, leadership is about maintaining relationships all around you. So you have resources that you can go to, and that like it's a relationship thing is what leadership is. So how do I keep those relationships healthy as I'm managing projects that I know will impact some of my friends that I worked with for years. And so that was hard for me, was walking through how do you go from a trusted leader to this is a disconnected manager, right? That's up here in the ivory palace of leadership.
Did that require a lot of intentionality to maintain that?
Absolutely. And so I do that, and I'm at an advantage right now in my department that I work for. So left one department, go to Pedernales Fire Department, where it's a smaller department. I got 3 stations, 3
That's
shifts.
easier, right? That's you can
Intentionality is easier.
And connect with each one of them.
And so I can go downstairs at the station I'm at, or I can go down to one of the other 2 stations, sit at the kitchen table or out at the picnic table out in the bay, and get into a conversation about how communication works. And it'll be I'm gaining a ton out of it.
Yeah.
They're able to have real interactions with me where they know that I'm looking for like, hey, how can I help make your job better?
Yeah.
So that intentionality.
Have they gotten used to seeing you enough that it's just normal now when you walk in the room?
Yes, and but also I would say probably, and if somebody in my department is watching this, it might be like, Chief, you're not around as much as you should be. And so it's a balancing act too, right? Like I have stuff that I've got to do that makes me not present, and I have to say, no, I got to find a system. I got to make a plan to make sure I am present, and that I am plugged in, and not a disconnected person that's sitting in their office, but a leader that and you can trust. What I was going to say about one of the advantages, that's one, is the size of it.
Well,
another advantage.
Before you get off that too, it is it's a tension, right? You're holding this tension between I need to be FaceTime with my people, getting things done, joking around, laughing a little bit, seeing how they're doing. But also, there's things I got to get done in the office that
100%.
If it doesn't get done, like they're not getting paid next week.
Right.
So we're always kind of in that tension point, right? And the goal is we don't abandon one or the other.
And it's, again, like a work-life balance is a hard thing to juggle and manage. That relationship between like being present and being in your office is very similar, right?
Yes,
like
it is.
I prefer the times that I'm sitting at a fire station, having a Diet Dr. Pepper and listening to people tell me about what's been going on at that station or with that shift, right? Yeah. And getting to kind of hear how the policies that we were working on or the budget ramifications that we were trying to explain,
how it affects
or the
them.
thing that we talked about in our organizational health study, right, that I've processed one way that I'm able to say, oh, no, the way you processed that makes way more sense to me. I missed something when we did that. Yeah. And so to be able to do those things, I love that.
Yeah.
That's how I'm wired. I'm,
that's also where you learn if the vision is actually getting out there to the team, if they're talking about it, if they believe it. And you learn, are we unified on terminology?
Right.
I was working with a fire chief one time, and he was really frustrated with his people because he said they won't take ownership. They don't own their role. They don't own the responsibilities. There's no ownership. And I said, well, do they know what ownership means? He's like, well, of course, they're adults. They know what ownership means.
Yeah.
So we gathered together for a leadership retreat, 10 men around the table, 10 different definitions of ownership.
Sure.
So it was this chance for them to then unify around what ownership means.
Yeah.
And then start to
make
use
a shared
it.
definition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They co-created the definition.
Yeah.
They can now use it on a moment-to-moment basis.
Yeah.
And they're speaking the same language.
Yeah, it's
and
important.
a lot of that happens when you're with people. It doesn't happen when you're behind your desk.
Right. We just the word communication that I've
Yes.
talked about.
Yeah.
So we just did an organizational study.
Yep.
One of the things that the members in the department said we don't do a good job at was communication on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah.
The first time I heard that, I was kind of offended because when I took over as chief, that was a thing I was like, we're going to do really good at communication. Like,
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
a thing that was a struggle that they said, hey, we want better communication.
Yeah.
Got a newsletter going, do monthly shift meetings where I get everybody together. Intentionally going out, my assistant chief too. And it's like, how are we missing this? But what I realized is what I was hearing as communication is, hey, I'm giving you access to the information. We're sharing it with you in as many different ways as we can. What they were, where we were missing and where we're currently missing and we're working on right now is on the follow-up. So you'll tell me something.
Yes.
And you believe that I'm listening to you, and
Yeah.
you believe that I'm hearing you,
Yeah.
and that I want to do something about it.
Yeah.
But then you don't know what the outcome was of that.
Yes.
And while sometimes you can't know what the outcome
Yeah.
of it was, sometimes you can, or you can at least know that, hey, I'm looking into this, I'm taking some steps.
Yes.
Or maybe what you need to know is, I looked at it, we're not doing anything different. It turns out this is actually the best way, but we looked at it. But we were doing a bad job at that piece, at coming back and saying, hey, here's where we wanted, here's how we had solved the problem or didn't solve the problem. And that's the communication.
And
it took me 3 different
point.
times of hearing it with different shifts.
Yes.
And then some side conversations to be able to go, that's what we're talking about.
And that's such a great point because as I'm working with organizations that are trying to get better at communicating, the follow-up is like 90% of it. One is to say, hey, we're going to work on a thing. And then if they don't hear anything else about that thing ever again, they just assume it's dropped off the radar.
Right.
They don't know that behind the scenes we've been working really hard on this, and here's 14 updates because they didn't send those out.
Right.
And so it really is the follow-up. I think that's an interesting key to land on to say, yeah, this is what we've got to get better at. And if it makes you feel better, again, you're not alone. Every organization, communication is like top of the list of what we need to do better. And I think it's one of those things, I think it's like vision, it's like culture, you're never done.
Right.
Because y'all are, how many people overall in the organization?
There's 53.
53. So a group of 53 people, there's going to be miscommunication all over the place.
Absolutely.
You are never done communicating. It is this ongoing practice.
Yeah.
And that's hard for a lot of people. They want to check the box of communication and say, well, I did it.
No, it's really tough, and you're right. And it's not a check the box thing. It's a living thing that we have to manage well.
Yes.
Is how are we communicating?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about the younger generation coming in. And so as you meet younger people, say, hey, I'm thinking of going to the fire service.
Right.
What advice do you have for them? Based on your years and years of experience, we can say decades at this point, what advice do you have for them about getting into that service?
Yeah. So, and earlier on in my career, when I made lieutenant, I started working at our academy, and I was working with cadets.
Yes.
And some of the best advice that we decided as kind of a group that we would give was, hey, your relationship, that your reputation starts today. Like it starts right now in the academy, and the day that you walk out there to the station, people are going to know something about you.
Yes.
And you have to maintain and manage that relationship from day one.
That is so important.
And I'll tell you, I was at the beginning of my career, I wasn't great at giving good relief. So we did a 12 o'clock shift change.
Yep.
I'd be there, 5 minutes, 10 minutes early. Wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And so it took a little bit of work to get me there. And then I got to where okay, I'm given the same kind of relief that is expected.
Yeah.
But I built a reputation that I didn't give good relief. And it took me a long time to outperform the 3, 4 months, 5 months, whatever it was that I was given bad relief, because my reputation mattered from day one, and I didn't manage that part well.
It's
so that's
interesting.
one piece.
I see a lot of people that get promoted through the ranks, and sometimes to get there, they're stepping on other people.
Right.
Those people don't forget.
They don't.
And to be thinking about that from moment one, that every conversation is going to lend to your reputation. And are they going to, we've actually talked about this today in a different interview, are they going to celebrate when you get promoted? Or are they like, oh, that jackass? Right. You know, like, how are they going to feel if you get a promotion?
Yeah.
And that is all management. It is all, how am I interacting relationally with you? How am I caring for you? How am I supporting you?
Sometimes watching somebody that you think shouldn't have been promote can be very motivating for the next people. So, like, every once in a while, if you promote somebody that shouldn't have promoted, hopefully the next people are watching, they're like, if this guy's going to be promoted, like, I better get in the books here because I got to make sure I do it.
Yes.
So I would like to tell you one other thing, though, advice-wise, that here, I think I wish somebody would have told me this earlier on in my career, is that it's okay to be different and unique. So, and especially as you start moving into being an officer. Yeah. So in the fire service, there's a lot of like type A leaders, right? It's like that's
type A leaders mixed with conformity.
Yeah,
right?
and you get a lot of that. And so I remember when I made lieutenant, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, is my crew gonna like me as a leader? Because that's not my style. That's not the way that I operate. Everything I've seen before, when you watch a movie or a TV show, and this is what a leader looks like that wasn't the way that I was wired. Yeah. Wired totally different. This was, I felt comfortable with it for the most part, but it was always a concern of mine. I've become a division chief, and we're getting ready to do like an executive retreat. It wasn't really a retreat. It was just like a 2-day workshop, right? Yeah. In town. And so, like, hey, everybody needs to do this personality study, and then we'll talk about the results. So everybody does this personality test. It pops up on the screen. It's like, hey, here's who we are as the executive team. Yeah. And here's kind of how we view things. Oh, and here's Tony. And here's how we view this other set of things.
This outlier over here
and here's
named
Tony.
Yeah.
Right? And I was sitting there, and it was like,
that was scary,
almost like I'm getting shamed again. And I'm like, no, it's like my worst fears are coming true. Here I am. I'm in this room, and I'm supposed to be one of the leaders in the department, and I'm being told that clearly I don't see things the way that I should. I don't, that I'm not going to be the one that responds in the right way because I don't know how to do this like everybody else does. And so, but one of the lady that was leading the exercise was like, hey, so Tony's our unicorn. Like, he's different. He views things different than us. Like, if you are trying to solve something you can't solve, go grab him and ask him because maybe he's going to see it from a different perspective. Yeah. And so to me, I'm like, we need all kinds of different leaders in the fire service. We don't just, and there's going to be the type of leader that you expect. And we need that leader too. Yeah. But if you're not that, if you're not the standard leadership style that you've known to expect, it's okay. You be you. And that's super valuable.
You and I have a mutual friend in Lieutenant Matt Davis from Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office. He's a previous guest on the show. He talks a lot about being your authentic self, right? About saying, this is who I am, and I can be a successful leader as I am. I don't have to transform into something else. And in law enforcement, we've done more work with law enforcement than fire service. I'm really familiar with similar types. Right. And we've done a lot of personality assessments through that process, and it attracts two particular types in general, and then there's the few outliers. Right. Some of the most successful people are the outliers. Yeah. They're the ones who are different, who are willing to stick out, because I think a lot of us are taught very early in life that to stand out is scary. Absolutely. Right? In school, if you were the weirdo, and I was, I almost said I was happily one of the weirdos. There was nothing happy about it.
You're happy miserable. With this, right? Yeah.
Definitely one of the weirdos.
Yeah.
You don't want to be that. Nope, we're taught that being the same is what matters. And so we have to almost unlearn that as adults, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I talked with Matt about this exact conversation, right? Yeah. Like being yourself as a leader, that can be scary and all of these pieces. And I said, I think like in 1985, we might not have been accepted as good leaders. He said, no, we wouldn't have. Like, we probably wouldn't have. Yeah. But I'm glad that like as a lot of this has to do with the new workforce coming in. Yes. We have a lot of people that are way more open to a different type of leadership. In fact, they expect a different type of leadership.
They do.
They'll embrace a different type of leadership.
I think part of it is the realization over time that the way we were doing things does not work. Right. It's funny. I quoted earlier today. I don't know if you're a Marvel movie fan, but the new Deadpool movie came out, and he has this moment where a Gen X person is a millennial's complaining about something, and he says, "Oh, you millennials with your trauma." He said, "Why can't you just turn it into productivity and cancer like the rest of us?"
Exactly.
And that one line so to me embraces this idea that, hey, our generation,
right,
we were taught a certain way of doing things, and it turns out it does not yield the positive results we think it does.
Right.
And so we're learning, we do need to be vulnerable.
Yes.
We do need to actually do things differently. We need to admit, I'm human. I can't run through another wall. I don't have it in me, right?
Yeah, I'm done with this right now. I need a break.
That is so valuable. So I think it's a societal shift that's starting to happen. I'm seeing in the emergency services, slow to change, but the beginnings of a real shift in that direction.
I do too.
That embraces humanity. And I think that's where we've got to get to, because if we can't just look at the suicide rates in emergency services and go, is what it is.
No.
That's unacceptable. And so a lot of it is going to be saying, okay, how do we design a journey where we can both give ourselves to society and also care for ourselves in a deep way? Those two things, again, it's a tension point, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
That we're trying to maintain. And so I think that's a lot of why we're even having these conversations.
So the fire service, I think, got good at looking out for responder health.
Yes.
But it was really the physical
yes.
well-being for a long time.
Yep.
And so you'd see the health and wellness programs pop up.
Yeah.
And you'd see people doing annual physicals, and we're looking to see, you were checking, let's look at your blood work. Let's check your heart, right? Let's see if we're going to if we'll allow you to live through the stress of the job.
Yeah.
But we weren't really looking at what's going on in here and in here, and looking at the whole health, right? So your mental well-being, how are you actually feeling about this job that we're doing, until a little bit later. And we're going through that right now.
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of, we're looking at suicide, we're looking at failed marriages, we're looking at all of these things that are because of the stresses that we face in the career and the things that we see in the career. And we have to do a better job at a couple different things. On the front end, we got to make sure that, if you're a company officer and you show up to a scene and your rookie firefighter is sweating and they're nervous and they're like, boss, I don't know that I can go in and see this. Tell them it's fine. Yeah. I'm not going to expose you to that right now. Yeah. Right? Give them, because I know what would have happened to me.
They would have dragged
and they would have said,
in there.
"Oh, you're going first, right? You're handling this yourself.
Yes.
We're going to be in the background."
Yeah.
And I worked with great people, right? And so
it's still
maybe that's not how it would have gone, but that was the standard.
Yeah.
And so if we can do a better job at extending some grace and saying there might be some stuff that we're not ready for.
Yeah.
And then also saying, some of us have experienced a whole bunch of these things along the way. What do we have in place to allow you to get the help that you need, through counseling or through whatever type of a wellness program that your city, your department can plug into, and finding the right stuff that's appropriate for public service as well.
All this I'm discovering is managing these tension points, because ultimately, you said you would hope they would have grace and say, hey, I'm not going to expose you to this right now. Right. And I think the right now is necessary, because I think the reality is, if we got an entire generation of fire service that cannot go into an emergency scene, that's not helpful either, right?
I agree.
It's how do we, you can't go in right now. Now we need to have some deeper conversations about what are you looking for? What would make this work for you? How do we do this? And is this the right fit?
And that's important. I'm glad you said that, because I know that there will be somebody that watched that and go, Chief, we can't do that.
Yes.
We can't tell this firefighter they can't go in on the call. Yeah. And maybe that's true on some times. Yeah. But maybe it's not always true on other times. Yeah. And so,
because the reality is,
I'll support my officers. And if I had an officer that said, hey, I made a decision to leave Tony outside because but we need to talk with him, because I got to make sure that he's ready and that he's able to handle this on the next one. I got to make sure that he understands what it is that we do, and make sure that, is this the right career?
Is this the right fit? Because ultimately, you would want to discover that by a person going, hey, I don't think I can right now. Okay, let's have some deep conversations about that. You'd want to discover that they're not the right person without necessarily traumatizing them in the process,
Exactly.
right? Versus just, hey, we're going to shove you in this room and make you deal with this dead body just because that's how we were forced to do it, right? That's not helpful,
right?
And causes problems. That's really interesting.
Yeah,
it really is such a management of a tension point, isn't it?
Yeah, and we're not just dealing with a firefighter; we're dealing with a human.
Yeah.
And so if you're able to look at it that way, I think that's where you'll hopefully land on the best outcome more times than
So I want to get your take on something, because in working with a couple fire departments, one of the things I've heard is that this is where y'all are a step above law enforcement. And I know y'all are happy to point out anytime you're a step above law enforcement.
I'm not going to argue.
But the one place that y'all are really doing something better is when you go to a rough scene, a cop immediately jumps in their car by themselves and they go to the next thing. Y'all jump back in your truck as a group. Mm-hmm. And on the way back to the station, you're already processing, you're already talking, and then you're going to be with those people for the next probably day or more.
Right.
And you're going to sit around that table and you're going to eat meals together and you're going to talk about how you're doing with that.
Right.
I'm sure there's still a ton of work to be done in terms of vulnerability and talking about these things, but is that something that y'all are a step ahead?
Oh, I think so. I think, so this table right here, like, if you're in a fire station and there's a kitchen table, that's where the best work happens.
Yes.
And I think the second best work happens in the cab.
Yes.
Right? So on your way to and from a call, there is so much that happens there. And the general public probably wouldn't like some of the conversations as people are trying to deal with the stress of it. And
there's some darkness
there's a use
to
of
it.
dark humor or whatever. But the ability to come and sit down and to be able to check in on one another. So, we come back, and then a couple hours later, it's time for a meal, and it's like, hey, how's everybody doing? Right? Like, and we all just went through this together. I'm not having somebody else ask me, hey, sounds like you went on a hard call. How are you doing?
Yeah.
No, this is somebody that went there with me.
Yes.
And we're able to talk through that together. Moving out of my end goal that I wanted to be the captain on a truck company, that's what I gave up and that I missed the most is those interactions with this
You're not
small
that person
group
doing that anymore.
and that you get to be the one in the cab of the truck on the way to and from calls at the kitchen table doing that. I got to find other ways to do it. But man, the people that hold that job, there's a lot that goes into it and a lot of responsibility, I believe, that goes into that at looking out for your crew's health and wellness.
Yes. This is not necessarily your problem to solve. It's more going to land on people like me, but I love the connection here. And this is where, as emergency services, police and fire, y'all can learn from each other. Because I'm already thinking about how do we get in the law enforcement world, how do we recreate cab time and kitchen table time?
Yeah.
Because it is so valuable for mental health and just for not feeling like you're alone. And I think there's something to that that can be recreated somehow.
It's the most value. I think it's the best thing that the fire service has historically done.
Yes,
is
I think you're right.
That you're with your team.
Yes,
and that you're able to talk about it with your team.
Yeah,
all the other stuff that we're adding, have to keep adding.
Yeah,
got to keep finding other things too.
Yes,
but I can't imagine the most traumatic calls that I went on in my career.
Yep.
I can't imagine what that might have done to me
and just
if I'd have just just me. See you later. I'm out.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how that would have worked for me.
It doesn't end well, and the statistics probably.
Right.
I actually want to explore this more. I get really nerdy about this.
Okay, good.
I'm really curious about the suicide rates between police and fire.
Yeah.
My guess is the police is slightly higher, just based on this alone.
Yeah. I don't know.
I'm going to explore and find out. I'll get back with you on that one. We're going to have a lot more conversations.
Okay. For sure. Yeah.
The final question that we always close with, part of why we're doing this is to talk about sustainability for the future. Public service, I just don't think it's currently sustainable. We have too few resources. Got a lot of people working really hard, doing the best they can to keep society functional.
Right.
So what do cities need to start rethinking now to create that sustainable future for their teams?
So I think a couple things. I do think culture, like going back to like that's a core of this to me, right? I think establishing the right culture is really important.
Yeah.
We've talked about it a bunch, like this the new workforce that we've got, like they prioritize culture and time off over money, right? And so where I would have come to work and been like, hey, I got this job, I'm never leaving it, by the way. I'm going to just stay here, do this no matter what you guys do to me. Like, I'm never leaving. I'll make a fair wage. I don't even care how much really you pay me. Like, I'm not leaving. And so now we got people and it's like, well, hey, I actually want to make sure that I like the place that I go to work, that I'm treated well, that I feel fulfilled at the end of the day. And I think that that's like what culture is, right? Yeah. You like where you work. How are you treated there? Yep. Are you fulfilled? And so if you can build that into your culture for a city or for a department, and you can say, we're gonna provide you with that stuff, you don't become immune to, but nearly immune to some of the other stuff that can cause you to lose employees or lose motivation in employees, because
that cultural side is so big. Because something you said is we want them to feel fulfilled.
Yes.
Our philosophy is we want everybody in every organization we work with to finish each day tired but fulfilled.
Yeah.
We're so good at the tired. We're not great at the fulfilled.
I know.
And that comes from impact and purpose and vision and all the things that we're talking about here.
And so you want to give people the opportunity to be, if you sign up for a job where you're going to do public service, you want to be serving somebody. You want to have some opportunities to do it. I think, so specific to the fire service, right? Yep. Which, by the way, I think the fire service years ago was totally named wrong, because fire is like a little bitty chunk of it.
It's such a fraction of what y'all do, right?
Yeah, I think we're the public service department more than the fire service, right? And so, because we do fire, we do EMS call. Yes. We change a tire on the side of the road.
Yes.
We really are getting cats out of a tree or a gutter.
There
right?
are literally cats up
literally
in trees.
I've done this, right? Yeah. And so we're doing all of these things.
Yes.
Like, 911, what's your emergency? Yeah. Well, I don't know for sure. I'm sending you a fire truck, right? Like, we're going to come and we're going to solve that problem. Yeah. And so we want to go and serve. Like, that's what we're there for. But I think we need to be, again, like, how does a city or how does a department make sure that we're able to thrive in the process? You want to be looking for that innovation, like what's next, okay? I think one of the big points where we can give people the opportunity to be fulfilled in serving somebody, where maybe it's not because they went on a call. Yep. Maybe it's not because they were driving and somebody had a flat tire and you stopped and you helped them. Yeah. But it's public education. And so we're doing a new program right now that is going to come out for our community in October. It'll be funded. It's part of our next budget year. And it is an AED program where we're trying to put AEDs into different hot spots across the community. Okay. Where we'll provide the AED and some training. Yep. We'll remotely check the health of that system, replace pads as needed, and we'll do training for people to teach them how to do CPR, how to use the AED. This came because our EMS coordinator, Clayton Blunt, did some research, and he's like, hey, over the last 5 years, let's look at the numbers of CPR calls. So in our district, I wrote them down, because we had 30% of the calls that we went on, CPR calls we went on, 30% of these calls, bystander CPR started. Okay. Only 8% of the calls was an AED applied before we arrived. Right. So that's a small pool of people that would have had both. Yeah. The patients that had both bystander CPR and an AED before we arrived, 40% of them had return of pulse. Oh, wow. So that's a really high percent. Yeah. And those two factors are huge. Well, most places don't have an AED. Like, we're getting better at that, just across the board. Yeah. But we want to be a part of that. So we're trying to help to get them into the right spots, to give the right training, to increase survivability in our district. Yeah. And so we're doing a program on that. Right? It does, but it also, like, he just wrote up his whole plan for this, and I was reading it, and there's a whole lot of key players to it, right? So there's our coordinator is going to manage it. The on-duty crews are going to have opportunities to go and do training with people. So you get to fulfillment, right? So maybe they didn't have a call that they really felt like they did something, but they went and did some training, and they taught somebody how to use the AED and how to do CPR. Yeah. That's impactful. They're going to feel that. They're going to know, man, I'm making a difference, right? Like, I look at it as it's a force multiplier for our department. Yes. Every single time we have that interaction. And
if that saves one life every year or two, I mean, that's totally worth the investment.
If it saves one life one time. Yeah. And I believe it will. Like, that's what the numbers are showing us, is it will. Like, having the AED there.
How innovative and creative is the fire service in general when it comes to ideas like this?
I think mostly pretty good. Okay. So, I mean, obviously, like, historically, when you look at, like, public and private sector, we can be behind on technology.
Sure.
Like we're slower to get technology into the public sector.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of great innovation that comes out of the fire service.
Yeah.
And there's been a lot of things where the fire service has said, hey, we figured out something that can be helpful.
Yep.
And we're going to push this out.
Yep.
So like Ready, Set, Go campaigns, when you're looking at, all the wildfire dangers in our community.
Yep.
And you look at, hey, we've found some best practices, and here's a training tool that we can go into your community for FireWise communities and train you how to do that.
Oh, wow.
And so these are like innovative concepts that, firefighter comes up with this thing somewhere and it kind of spreads throughout the fire service. And these little things happen.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately mostly good.
Yeah.
I think we could always do better.
Yeah. It's one of those things that's never done, right?
And I think also, like, we've been talking about like the current workforce right now and some of the things that they expect and some of the things that they want.
Yep.
One of the things that they expect and that they want is opportunity. Right?
Yeah.
They want opportunity to help and to bring stuff on. I've got a guy who's working part-time for me. He'll be a full-time employee for mine by the time that this episode airs. And he's working on a MAP program with some of the skills that he learned in college that we don't really have, but he's going to make this resource with, clickable layers and allow people to be able to better study their territory and be able to identify, target hazards and hot spots throughout our community.
Yeah.
I told him yes, right? Like, let's do this. And so if we can get leaders that will say yes to ideas.
That's the thing I was just thinking about is this is where the healthy leadership matters, right?
Yes.
Because if you're healthy, you are open to people below you having great ideas. In fact, you're hungry for it.
Yep.
If you're not healthy, you're stuck in your ways. Nope, we ain't doing that. We're just going to entrench here and not consider new things. That's not good either.
No, and I said, please, like, bring that now. Like, don't wait until you feel like, now I've been here for 4 or 5 years. I can add value. Yeah. Like, day one, bring the value, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yes,
is what I said earlier.
Let's
like, I got
into it.
If I bring 5 people, that's 10% of my department.
Yeah.
Like, I want to bring those people in, and I don't want to tell them to, hey, sit in the corner and be quiet. Like, if you've got something great, if you've got a great idea, some innovation, like, bring it.
And also,
it might be something we're not going to do.
Right. Yeah, we can't
and
say
that's
yes to
fair.
everything.
That's fair to say.
Hear it out.
But I want to hear it.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to know, like, what's your idea, because maybe it's a game changer for us.
And that becomes such a great story to tell to the entire department. Hey, this guy came up with this idea. We're implementing it. Here's the things we're seeing, the benefits. We're so proud of him for that. You're going to have other people start to generate ideas.
Yeah, they're like, oh, I had an idea like that. Let me pitch this to you. Yeah.
That is so cool. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, I think innovation's huge.
Yeah, I agree. Tony, this has been such a good conversation.
It's been great.
I love the vision caster, culture warrior. I think that's going to be really beneficial for so many listeners. I appreciate you being here, man. We'll have you on again in the future. I think you and I can sit and talk about leadership for a really long time.
Anytime.
Thank you, brother.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you for joining us for Leading Thriving Cities. We are dedicated to giving away everything we teach and, importantly, everything we learn while we're on the ground partnering with cities to develop healthy leaders and thriving teams. You can find all of that leadership development content on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Just search for @ForwardPartner. You can also find more information about what we do at forwardpartners.net.